Good morning, students. Today we will continue with the chapter of how do organisms reproduce. Today we will talk about sexual reproduction in flowering plant. Sexual reproduction in flowering plant. Now, a flower is a reproductive organ in an flowering plant. So, flower is a reproductive organ. Flower is a reproductive organ. If we talk about the structure of flower, it has the following parts. It has a stalk by which it is attached with the stem. It is attached with the stem with the help of the stalk. The upper part of the stalk is swollen and is known as thalamus, and on this thalamus the sepals and the petals are attached. Sepals, they protect the flower in bud state. Protect the flower in bud stage. Whereas petals, they are colorful, which attract the insects. The male part of the flower is known as stamen. So this is the male part of the flower, which is stamen. It consists of two parts. The upper part, which is known as anther, and the long slender stalk, which is known as filament. Combining this, we call it stamen. The female part of the flower is known as carpel. It consists of stigma, style, and ovary, and these all parts combined are known as carpel. So the male part of the flower is known as stamen. It consists of two parts, anther and filament. The female part of the flower is known as carpel, which consists of stigma, style, ovary. Accessory parts are petals, which are colorful to attract insect, and sepals, which protect the flower in bud state. By the stalk, the flower is attached to the stem, and thalamus is the swollen structure from which sepals and petals arise. Now, we should also know the group of carpel is known as gynoecium. Group of stamen is known as androecium. Group of sepals is known as calyx. And group of petals is known as corolla. So this is the general structure of a flower. Now let us talk about pollination. Pollination is transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of a flower. Now imagine this is one plant and it has flower, and this is other plant and it has this flower. So this is the first plant and this is the second plant. These yellow color are the pollen grains which are present in the anther. This is the anther. This is the stigma. This is the anther. This is the stigma. Now, if pollen grains are transferred from the anther to stigma of the same plant, it is known as self-pollination. Transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of same plant is known as self-pollination. If we talk about another type of pollination, that is cross-pollination, in which the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of another plant. So this is cross-pollination. Transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of different plant of same species. So transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of different plant is cross-pollination, whereas transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma of same plant is self-pollination. Now let us talk about fertilization. Fertilization is fusion of male and female gamete. We already know that this is the stigma, this is the style, and this is the ovary. Stigma, style, ovary. Now the pollen grain has landed on the stigma with the help of pollination. Now this pollen grain will produce a tube which is known as pollen tube. So this is pollen tube. Now inside the ovary there is ovule, and inside the ovule there is a structure called as embryo sac. Embryo sac is 8 nucleated 7-celled structure. Let us draw the structure of embryo sac. It consists of upper 3 cells known as antipodal cells, central 2 cells known as polar nuclei, and lower 2 synergids with 1 egg. This is structure of embryo sac. So when the pollen grain lands on the stigma, it forms the pollen tube. This pollen tube grows through the style and reaches the embryo sac. Inside the embryo sac, this pollen tube, which contains 2 male gametes, the pollen tube consists of 2 male gametes. These 2 male gametes which are inside the pollen tube are released inside the embryo sac. Now out of this, 1 male gamete fuses with egg to form zygote, and this is known as syngamy. And the second male gamete fuses with polar nuclei to form primary endosperm nucleus, and this is known as triple fusion, because here one nucleus of one male gamete and two nucleus of two polar nuclei. So in total 3 nucleus are fusing, so it is known as triple fusion. And syngamy plus triple fusion is called double fertilization. So now the pollen tube has reached the embryo sac. It has released its 2 male gametes inside the embryo sac. One male gamete has fused with egg to form zygote. Another male gamete has fused with polar nuclei to form primary endosperm nucleus. And since 2 fertilization are taking place, this is known as triple fusion. Now, after the fertilization is over, the ovary develops into fruit. Ovule develops into seed. Rest other structures of the plant fall off except the ovary. Now let us talk about reproduction in human beings. Before learning about reproduction in human beings, let us look at stages of human development. The first stage of human development is infants. Infant is children between 1 month to 1 year. Second stage of development is toddler. Toddlers are children between 1 year to 4 years. Third stage of development is adolescent. Adolescent is age between children between 11 to 18 years, and above 18 years comes the fourth stage, that is adulthood. So there are 4 stages in total: infant, children between 1 month to 1 year, toddler between 1 year to 4 year, adolescent between 11 to 18 year, and above 18 years is the adulthood. Now let us discuss what is puberty. Puberty is the period during which a child becomes mature. It is a period during which reproductive systems of boys and girls mature. The period for puberty is different in males and females. In girls, the puberty begins at age of 11 years, whereas in boys, puberty begins at age of 12 to 14 years. The following are the changes which occur during puberty in boys. In boys, during puberty, there is hair growth in pubic region. There is deepening of voice. There is development of beard, and there is broadening of shoulders. Whereas in girls, there is enlargement of breast, menstrual cycle begins, hip girdle becomes broad, and voice becomes high pitch. So following are the changes in boys and girls during puberty. In boys, there is hair growth in pubic region, deepening of voice, development of beard, broadening of shoulders. Whereas in girls, there is enlargement of breast, menstrual cycle in which there is discharge of blood and mucus begins, hip girdle becomes broad and voice become high pitch.